And we welcome you to another edition of This is Wrestling. It is Lee Versage alongside the one and only Zach McGibbon. Zachary, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Lee. It's been a little bit, but looking forward to this conversation. Hopefully people have been able to keep themselves tuned in over the last couple of Dark Side of the Ring reviews we've been putting out over the last couple of days. A lot of really good content, but now back here on the main flagship of the show, so looking forward to it.
So we do, unfortunately, have some sad news. Terry Brunk, better known as Sabu, has passed away, Zach. And I think for me, as a person growing up in the ECW era and being able to see Sabu live a few times for me, lot to talk about with his career. And we also, I think, and this is nice, to be able to bring us back, because Zach, it is Wednesday as we're recording this, and Backlash was on Saturday night in the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri. It's got the Arches, the home of Superstore on Netflix. If you like that, by the way, you should watch that. It may be one of the funniest shows I've ever seen.
I've heard really good things about it. I got to check it out.
It's incredible. However, Zach, it's been, hold on, let me do the math. Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday. So that to me is like 96 hours almost. It's been about 90 hours.
Yeah.
Since Backlash 2025, St. Louis, Missouri. Randy Orton and John Cena in the main event. So Zach, I'm glad you're with us. And it's nice that I've had a little bit of time to be able to, I would say, calm down or get my emotions in check, be able to talk with you on a level, Zachary, that I'd like to. I'd like to sometimes remove the emotion and just be able to break things down. But this one's going to be really hard, Zach. 90 hours and I'm still angry. I'm cranky. I'm angry. I'm a lot of things. So good on the WWE for getting me to feel this 4 days after a show. But I can't wait to hear your breakdown of it.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this Backlash show for sure.
So,
I knew you were in for quite an episode when you were texting me after the show about your thoughts. It's like, oh boy.
So normally what we would do is we would sort of look at the card, the pay-per-view, and I would say more times than not, start at the beginning and then come to a conclusion. Get the climax at the end, the main event. Why people pay $44.99 American if they wanted to purchase the pay-per-view. Because John Cena and Randy Orton, two of the greatest of all time, going at it, Zach, one last time in 2025. So because there's just so much respect for both of those guys, we're not going to let them wait till the end. They deserve to be spoken about, don't they?
I feel like that's very honorable, you know, especially when this is the last match of these two one-on-one that we'll ever see of them. I think it's only honorable that we start off with them to give them the proper discussion it deserves.
Right. So could you say that sentence again, right? At least the first part of that sentence again? This is the last time we're ever going to see this?
That's right. The last time we'll see these two one-on-one in a match, certainly for a title at this point as well.
Holy crap, thank God. Zach, I'm still boiling. I'm boiling over to bring myself to understand how far the company has fallen in 3 months and I really want to hear what you have to say about it because I'm still kind of bubbling. It's like when you pour, you know, say for me a beer, and you just pour it right into the glass, and you don't angle it, you don't pour it properly, and what happens, Zach? It just all bubbles over.
That's right.
Yeah, you want to have yourself a nice Coca-Cola? Are you a Coke guy or a Pepsi guy?
I tend to gravitate towards the Coca-Cola, but I don't mind me a Pepsi.
Okay, so you're not really stuck. People who get stuck on that kind of stuff, I'm like, understand what you're deciding on. Like you could rust a nail in the Pepsi and you could rust a nail in the Coke.
Yeah.
It's the same, folks. So not get all worried. Like Coke or Pepsi. Both of them will really hurt your gut, but they're very refreshing.
Very refreshing.
And so you just pour it in, it just sort of bubbles over. You got to pour it gently. That's how I'm feeling right now. So I do want to hear your analysis, but I'll just tell you that I'm having a very, 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 very hard time. If I do not count the COVID pay-per-views where nobody was in attendance, because I honestly think that it's just not right to compare them. It's not apples to apples. But I'm having a hard time thinking that I've seen a worse main event in the history of professional wrestling. So I'll just leave you with that, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts.
Well, I didn't like it. I thought it sucked. You know, I said it in the preview episode that I never liked these matches, even when these two were considered in their primes in 2009 and 2014, 15. I think they also had a match in 2017. So those would be more the prime years of John Cena, Randy Orton. And so I was not going into this main event with very high expectations. Boy, did I, I was going in thinking, well, these two will not have a great match because, you know, it's John Cena at this stage of his career and it's Randy Orton, again, bad back. And I was thinking, well, these two, they'll try and they'll try and do something here, and then we'll probably get some sort of, you know, crazy finish or whatnot so that it could protect these guys and all this stuff. And I can at least walk away saying, you know what? I went into this match thinking this is going to be not great. But at least these guys tried, and at least it met that expectation level. Oh boy, I mean, it started off, it was exactly what I thought it would be. Boy, Lee, did we get those Randy Orton stomps. Boy, Lee, did we get that headlock. Boy, did we get the slow burn, the slow build in the match that we usually see with a Randy Orton match. And we were really getting it at the start. And I was thinking, oh, here we go. This is what I'm strapped in for. Can't wait to see all these buttery smooth holds that, you know, Randy Orton is able to apply here. But it actually went to another level that I did not think it would go to when it comes to this main event, in that they decided to make up for the fact that these two cannot wrestle at a high level at this stage of their careers. They decided to make up for that by having this incredibly overbooked and overindulgent finish where it felt like everybody on the WWE roster was running out to interfere. At some point, I was waiting for you to run out, Lee. I felt like everybody in the world was going to be running out. If
you think I would subject myself to being good enough or bad enough to go into the ring with those two in 2025, you are out of your mind. Lee, we need you in there. Forget about it.
Brother, we need you for this run-in spot. Well, look, if R-Truth could go out there, why can't Lee Versage in the main event? R-Truth came out. I think there was at least 17 different RKOs hit during the match, and I might not even be that far off. I think there was like 9 attitude adjustments. You know, this is the thing.
And okay, hold on. And before you continue, I would just like, it's not an opinion, it's an apology. And I mean this with the utmost sincerity because I always mean my apologies, Zach, always.
Of course.
Yeah. I'm always 100% sincere. But in this case, I would like to formally apologize to you in saying that, do you think that this will be a finisher heavy match? And for some reason, I thought, no, they will wait until the end. They'll do a couple each. It'll be fine. But as you said, if you combine the AAs and RKOs, you might get to 20.
Yeah, we're not even kidding. Like,
no, I'm not kidding at all.
It was
In
a
fact,
finisher fest.
So I apologize. You said it was possible that this could happen, and I was picturing like Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar and Goldberg and like Spear, Claymore, F5, F5. And that's all the matches ever were. And I was picturing, I go, nah, I don't think so. But unfortunately, they did as many of their finishers as humanly possible and added another 20 minutes to the match.
Yes.
So they did both. Yeah. And so, Zach, it is with my utmost sincerity that I would like to apologize to you because you were correct.
Well, I appreciate that, Lee Versage. It takes a man of integrity to apologize, and on this, it's all. I accept your apology. It is all good on that front. I did want to say though.
Thank you for accepting that. I mean, the fact that I made it through this live event and watched this in real time is somebody should be apologizing to me, and that hasn't happened yet. But I will apologize to you because I was wrong.
I want to say this when it comes to the finisher fest. I don't want to hear any more critiques ever again about the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega or any of those guys spamming finishers ever again. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. How many times do we see these finishers here, Lee? That was like way more than what we would see in a Kenny Omega or a Young Bucks or a Will Ospreay match.
It's not even in the same stratosphere.
Not even the same stratosphere. By the way, all those people that yap about all these finishers that those guys do, awfully quiet when it comes to this main event match. Very, very noticeably quiet. Not willing to say anything about that. Huh. I wonder why that's the case there, Lee.
Well, probably because at least one of the finishers or so-called finishers in the Attitude Adjustment is possibly the worst finisher of all time.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to have a guy up on my shoulders and I'm just going to kind of shove him off.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it was made better. It was made better by an equally, if not worse, finisher in the STF that John Cena applied, where apparently there was force, apparently there was pressure being put in place in the STF. I mean, he was never great at it to begin with, but it was especially prevalent here.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd actually like to go back here and start at the beginning.
Okay.
And kind of reconstruct this match. And I'll tell you about my text messages to Zach, folks, along the way here. But let's start with the fact, and this was pointed out to me by, I would call a staunch WWE fan, who I asked if they watched the match live, and they said, well, I watched Randy Orton come out, and he didn't take as long as I thought. And then I saw, because they were not watching live, I saw there was still 34 minutes left in the show. And Randy Orton was already standing in the ring waiting for John Cena. So even the most staunch fan said, I didn't really watch it all. So as you said, it began with as boring a way as you could ever, like, they're feeling each other out. It was just awful.
Yeah. And not in the engaging, like working on a hold or anything like that and targeting thing. It was just exchanging moves. That's it.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. Nothing engaging.
And then it finally started, I guess, to pick up. And after that, it just became finisher fest all the way. And as these things were going on, it's just like the Attitude Adjustment's the worst thing ever. And I would like to point out that the RKO, which I thought at least was somewhat well protected, and that if an RKO was delivered, there was really good chance that the match could end. And if someone was going to kick out of an RKO, then that would be like this actual, wow, I can't believe that happened. Okay, where are they going to go with this moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
John Cena kicked out of 2. And then on the third one, do you know what happened, Zach? The referee with one of the most like 18 million ref bumps that there were
Yes.
wasn't available because when Chad Patton got run over the second time and thrown into the steel steps and was laying there unconscious, somehow nobody checked on this guy for at least 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Even the announcers were like, somebody should check on him. Yeah, somebody should.
Announcers didn't have a great night either.
No.
I mean, Michael Cole missing the adjustment, no pun intended there, that from the RKO into the attitude, from the attitude adjustment.
Literally missed one of the biggest spots in the match.
Yeah. Missed it.
An attitude adjustment that was turned into an RKO. He completely missed it.
Yep.
So as this was going along, and now it's in Finisher Fest.
Yep.
And it's just attitude adjustment, attitude to RKO. He's kicked out of 2. I texted you and said, this is so bad.
Yep.
Your response, God, I can't stand this match. I said, I honestly can't believe that somebody would book it this way.
Well, I mean, I could, but.
Yeah, I couldn't. At this time in 2000, I couldn't. It was beyond my realm that somebody could actually book this. And then you sent me one of the greatest clips that I'd forgotten about with Triple H in the ring and the entire roster on the outside having a chance to speak and telling everybody that they have no confidence in Triple H.
No confidence. I'm sorry, Triple H. No confidence.
Hunter, I'm sorry. No confidence.
I don't know if you hear what they're saying, but I'm saying no confidence too. I'm reluctantly walking out.
Incredible.
It was incredible. It actually made me laugh and smile for the first time in this whole card, let alone this match. And I said, to see how far they backtracked in 3 months is staggering. And you said so many run-ins, interference spots, and I said and AAs and RKOs. So they're going through all of this mess. 3 referee bumps. And then who comes down? R-Truth. I actually thought like this was a joke. Like I thought, okay, well, he's going to come down and it's going to lead to somebody else coming down and lead to somebody cool coming down. Like I actually believed this, Zach, as it was happening. It's like the prelude to, it's like what do they call the pre-appetizers now in these like 9-course meals? You can have a pre-appetizer and then an appetizer. I thought this was the pre-appetizer. Nope. R-Truth playing a big part in the match and the press conference after, which we'll get to. But R-Truth comes down in St. Louis and is the reason that Randy Orton loses. Can you, first of all, explain to me, Zach, then when he hits the RKO on John Cena, I think for the 3rd time in the match, and Cena's already kicked out of 2, and then with no referee, and Michael Cole is screaming about how Randy Orton has this match won, and he can't believe it that there's no referee because Randy Orton. I'm like, has he forgotten that Cena's kicked out of 2?
Yes. Has he watched the match?
Did he actually forget that when this was hit twice, that John Cena kicked out? And he's screaming at the top of his lungs about Randy Orton has this match won. Actually, Michael, no, he doesn't. In no way, shape, or form would I believe that an RKO now is going to pin John Cena when it hasn't pinned him twice. Why would I ever think that?
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me thrice, shame on everyone that was involved in this match. Shame on everyone that had booked this. Shame going all around.
And then, of course, R-Truth comes down. John Cena with the belt. Like, I can't even. Like, I don't understand why the people cared in the crowd. This is every single thing that I hate about pro wrestling. As you said, overbooked, overtime, terrible beginning of the match. All of a sudden, it got to finish her heavy right away, kicking out of everything. That's all we're seeing. An incredible amount of ref bumps. The worst person to ever think about coming out in the middle of a main event of these two comes out, and then John Cena wins in the same way that he won against Cody Rhodes, just knocking somebody out with a title belt, because we've never seen that before. And then what was the length of the match?
On my sheet, it was 27 minutes and 50 seconds was the length of the match.
Zach, I just can't think of one redeeming quality about this. Two people I don't want to see. Nothing in the match was, hey, that wasn't bad. That was cool. It felt like an hour. Overbooked. Just absolute crap. I mean, from the moment that this thing was going into the entrances to John Cena giving a promo afterwards, talking about the last real champion and standing on the turnbuckles, there is not one thing redeemable about this. Like, this to me goes back to, like, I go back to the worst era in wrestling, in my opinion, was around 94, 95. I think that was a terrible, at least on top, year, especially in WCW. And this reminded me of, like, for me, going to the Joe Kobo in Detroit and seeing Hogan and the Giant and knocking somebody off on a monster truck on the roof, but then he comes back and then it's like Brutus Beefcake getting a title shot because he's the Zodiac. Dungeon of Doom, Earthquake, or whatever his name was.
Not Typhoon. Shark. It was
Shark. Yeah. Shark getting title matches against Hogan. It's like, has this just gone back 10, 20 years? Is this what's happened? Like, you wouldn't pay, if you paid people to watch it, they go, I don't know. And that's how I feel about this.
Oh,
This is absolutely one of the most disgusting efforts I've ever seen. And to think that this could happen in 2025 is beyond my scope. It is. And I need you to explain it to me. To me, this company was on fire after the Royal Rumble, getting on Netflix, having Uso win and Charlotte Flair and all the great things we're actually seeing on Monday Night Raw, and heading into the WrestleMania season. These things were, like, I was excited about this company and where they were going. It's like they've backtracked 20 years to Zach. If you paid me $100 to watch this, I don't think I could. And I won't call myself cheap, Zach, but I'm frugal, thrifty. Okay. Watch my dollars, watch my cents.
That's
if
right.
you paid me $100, I'm like, I just don't know if I can do it.
that's not going to work for me, brother.
Like, I just think, tell me something redeemable about this. Honestly, in 2025 in May, tell me something that I can get out of this to go, at least I see what they were thinking.
Well, I guess I could say it's over now. We won't have to see this match ever again. That's a big factor.
Yeah, but with John Cena as the champion, and now we've seen like a horrific main event at WrestleMania. And again, I had someone say like, "Oh, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard the reviews were that was better than the match against Cody at Mania." I'm like, that's a pretty low bar, by the way.
It is.
One that Cody Rhodes is probably embarrassed about after what he's been through in the WWE in the last 2 years. And then it was actually worse to me because at least that one was kind of over fairly quickly and Cody was trying to do more things in that match.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't think of anything. Like, this is one of the worst single main events in the history of pro wrestling. And this is not so when people come out, John Cena, and brag about how much I hate it and you've invoked that emotion. No, this is go home heat. I literally want you to go home. And anything, like, I can't believe March 1st, right, was Elimination Chamber in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
We called it. Oh, I did. And I think you agree. One of the biggest heel turns in the history of pro wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Comparing it to Hogan.
Certainly one of the most shocking for sure.
Yeah. Comparing it to Hogan in 96. And some of the other unbelievable heel turns. That's what we were comparing this to. And in 2.5 months, you've embarrassed yourself, John Cena, more than any human being can embarrass themselves. Not showing up, getting to WrestleMania, one of the worst matches ever, hardly showing up into this and trying to top it with one of the worst matches of all time. You've embarrassed your legacy. You've embarrassed your history. And we want you, or I'll say, I won't speak for you. I want you to go home. I want to never see you again. Not because I hate you. It's just, I won't watch the product because you're on, because the product sucks ass. Okay. I feel like I've got that out.
You
now.
got that out. Well, you know what this reminded me of here, Lee? This reminded me of a TNA main event when Jeff Jarrett was the world champion, where it was just so overbooked and 1,000 run-ins were happening. And funny enough, Lee, a lot of those road agents that I like to bring up on these reviews are former TNA wrestlers and former TNA people. So I wonder if that also played a factor in this. Clearly, this was something where it's like, well, we got to do this. We got to try and make this as epic as possible. And what's more epic than two guys that are just hitting their finishers on each other and each guy kicking out in this epic, colossal match? But in the execution, it was just unbearable. It's like what you said, like so many things in this. It was what I just do not like in pro wrestling. And they were trying to tell you how epic this was, and it just wasn't. This is easily one of the worst main events I've seen. I think people will say the WrestleMania one's worse only because of how grand of a stage that match happened. But if you took this finish of what happened here into WrestleMania, I think people would say this was a worse match. This was bad. I mean, it was a bad professional wrestling match.
So I just can't believe, Zach, that this in 2025 was the main event. So John Cena, I think the thing that is scaring me the most now is that, look, Randy Orton stinks. And Randy Orton in the greatest wrestling match ever, as labeled by the WWE, that was one of the worst against Edge, is nowhere near what he was. And he was never a great wrestler before that. But in 2025, he's a shell of what he used to be. It's not a critique, it's just what it is. To put a title on a guy that's even worse than him, like, what are we in for now? What are we in for next?
How much more overbooked can it get?
Yeah, but what is the next match?
Oh God, I don't even want to think about that.
Like for John Cena, what is the next match?
Well, right now they're teasing something with R-Truth. I hope it's not R-Truth.
Yeah, but okay, I don't even care about a funny spot on Raw or because that doesn't even matter to me. What's the idea of where they're going with a serious contender after this? Like, I am begging them to not put, I don't know, even Cody back in there, CM Punk, Roman Reigns. Like, please don't put these people back in the ring with that guy.
Well, I was going to say, I think it might be Punk if they want to. If we're going to continue on this nostalgia tour, that is another one of the great rivals of John Cena was CM Punk. So that might be on the table.
But if Punk doesn't beat him for the title, I'm telling you right now, I'm not sure that Punk will ever recover from that. Because what type of match is going to be there that at the end of it, he's going to say, well, I didn't win the title, but it was a great match.
Right.
When people lose title matches, it doesn't necessarily bury them as long as it's a decent match and a good, a match that people want to see. It's okay. Well, how is he ever going to recover from what I'm going to call one of the worst matches of all time after he wrestles John Cena and doesn't win the title? Do you think that's good for him? I just can't even imagine a scenario right now of what would be good for him, for John Cena. What are we going to get?
I don't know. The more I think about it, the more it feels like a threat.
I just can't even. I actually hope he doesn't defend it again because I don't want to watch him.
You had your fill?
Anyway, let's talk about some of the other parts of the card. And look, I do think it says a lot, and I want to be very clear with this. I think it says a lot that the match I was most looking forward to on a pay-per-view by the WWE was one that had an announcer going after one of the best wrestlers on the card. Gunther and Pat McAfee. I actually thought that this was somewhat entertaining. And as good as it was possibly going to get. Now, we'll talk about a couple of critiques in the match. It was what I was looking forward to the most because I had to pick something. And at the end of it, it's the match I'm going to remember the most. So good on them. Pat McAfee took a crap beating and got up the next day and went back to doing what he was doing. So good on him. What do you have? Busted a blood vessel in the eye socket?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you build people, Zach. Nobody would believe that Pat McAfee could beat Gunther. He didn't. And again, I would change a couple things about the match, but at the end of it, do people respect Pat McAfee more for getting in there and taking a crap beating from Gunther? He looks just as good or better than he did going into the match. That's how you do it. What were your thoughts on Gunther and Pat McAfee?
So, like you, I was somebody that was looking forward to the match, and I got the sense from some of our listeners that it felt like we were in the minority on this because of the thought process of, well, Pat McAfee is an announcer and Gunther is Gunther. But the reason why I was so interested in this is because it was so different from everything else on the card that I was interested to see where it could go, right? And I wanted to see Pat McAfee get his ass kicked and just take a beating from Gunther. Because again, it would be something different than what we usually see on this card. And he did take an ass whipping. Let's make that clear. And out of all the matches, I gotta say it was either this one or the opening match that were probably my favorites. But like what you mentioned, there are definitely critiques with this and stuff that I would not do when it comes to booking. Number one, the length of time that McAfee was caught in that sleeper. I thought he had way too many hope spots at the end. And it's just, when you've already got what happened with Gunther at WrestleMania, where he tapped quickly to Jey Uso, now you've got him having a tough time trying to tap out Pat McAfee. There is a way to make that spot work where you have him being valiant in defeat, right? But I thought McAfee had way too many hope spots, and again, there was interference. This is another central theme of the whole show, by the way. You know how I feel about this, Lee. 4 of the 5 matches had interference spots. 4 of the 5 matches. And the other match, where we didn't get interference, we got a BS finish with an eye poke, so that wasn't even clean in itself. We didn't get one clean finish. All I wanted was just one clean finish. One professional wrestling match where the two would go back and forth. And I thought this one would be it. But no, Lee, we have to get Michael Cole his interference spot. Everybody's got to have an interference spot on this company. Michael Cole, R-Truth, the road agents, the general manager, all the wrestlers on the roster, every single one of them has to have some sort of interference spot. Everybody's got to get in on the action. Hell, I was shocked Triple H himself didn't run in and try and interfere in a match. If they were trying to get everybody, considering he wants to take credit for a lot of that stuff. And so, anyways, when it comes to Gunther and Pat McAfee, I thought there was too many hope spots at the end. And to the point where I'm like, is Gunther having a tough time trying to get this Pat McAfee guy down? Like, I can understand a hope spot where he's trying to fight back and fight with it, but then it's just too much because Gunther's too strong and Gunther's too powerful, and then he passes out. And then the show of respect at the end, which I didn't like, didn't need that, needed Gunther back as the killer, and they just gave him the show of respect. Didn't like the finish, but again, a lot of the stuff in between, I'm liking the idea of the match. It was just, they had too many hope spots. They had the interferences. It was just, it's WWE booking having to seep its way through into these matches.
It's okay to book a match where Pat McAfee gets his ass kicked and then is just overwhelmed after one hope spot.
Yep.
And people will have the respect for him. And I still have the respect for him afterwards, but you're right. Like, so Jey Uso gets Gunther at WrestleMania and he taps out in 3 seconds. Yet McAfee never tapped out. And in fact, at one point, with Gunther laying on the mat with his legs wrapped around McAfee, McAfee got out of that hold. Like, somehow he would be strong enough to hold off Gunther and break the hold. Which I don't understand. So I totally am with you on the hope spots. And I don't need to see Michael Cole involved in this.
Nope.
Like, one time to go to Michael Cole to say, finish the match. I don't love it, but okay. He was way too involved in this.
Oh, it was
Way
unbearable.
too involved. Yeah, it was bad. But at least at the end here, and the respect thing, I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you that I want Gunther back as the killer, but I think of anybody that you're going to do the respect thing to, it is McAfee, because I think it helps with the credibility of him with the rest of the people.
Sure.
And he's on every week as the announcer. He can get in the ring, and I think when you have a killer giving him that respect, he can get in the ring and be credible with other people. And so I understand. I'd like to see Gunther go back to the killer, but in this one time for him to give McAfee that respect, I don't have an issue with it because it really does help McAfee. And that's how I'm looking at it. So, but way too many hope spots. Michael Cole, I don't want to watch on my television as involved in an angle. I've already seen that when he was at WrestleMania and wrestling in the stupid headgear.
Yeah.
Like, I've already seen it. I don't need to see it again. And he's how old is he? 60 now?
It's got to be close to 60.
Well, they said his age, and it was like he's near a 60-year-old. I'm like, so I just don't need to be watching Michael Cole in an angle anymore. But I still enjoyed McAfee and Gunther for what it was, because at the end, I think McAfee gained some Let's talk about the eye poke of doom again. You brought it up.
Yeah.
Lyra Valkyria
There you go. You're getting it.
against Becky Lynch. And after getting the absolute crap beat out of her for most of the match, she, let me get this straight, gets poked in the eye, but does a roll up and then is kind of half hooking the leg while worrying about her eye, and then still gets Becky Lynch.
Correct.
So after all of the stuff that Becky Lynch did to her, then she got poked in the eye and somehow got lucky in a roll up, and it was kind of at the end, like barely had the leg hook because she was worried about her eye with one hand on it, and then got Becky Lynch. Well, if you're looking for any way to bring Becky Lynch back and make her look ridiculous, you've accomplished it in a month. So I'll give them that.
Yeah.
She looks ridiculous.
Yes. And also Cole missed the eye poke too, by the way.
Yeah.
He missed that one too. He had a bad night. I'm telling you. A bad night at the office.
There's nothing I liked about this, and I think making Becky Lynch look weak because you're trying to get Lyra up there as the Intercontinental Women's Champion, I just don't think it did. I don't look at Lyra and go, oh my God, what a great match, and she beat Becky, and that really is going to vault her up. I just think it made Becky Lynch look really stupid.
I didn't think it helped either person in terms of elevating them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the idea is to try and get Lyra Valkyria over, right? They gave them 18 minutes to work with for a match. And the funny thing too about a lot of this card is that I was actually enjoying the work that was being put in. I thought a lot of these guys and gals had their working boots on. It's just these asinine booking decisions that plague this company. And so you got this thing going with Lyra Valkyria. She takes the eye poke, but then she gets rolled up. Then she counters that roll up to win with the one eye and whatnot. And then almost immediately after getting the victory, Becky Lynch goes after Lyra Valkyria and beats her up. I mean, the music barely played when Lyra Valkyria won, and then Becky Lynch got her heat back. And so what did you accomplish? Who got over in the end? If you're trying to get Valkyria over, it didn't work because she just got her ass whipped after a fluky pinfall victory that you said was fluky, and then you got her ass kicked literally seconds after the pinfall. And in the case of Becky Lynch, you had her out there taking a fluky pinfall loss, and then, having to get her heat back to try and beat up Lyra Valkyria, so nobody gets over. Lee, are we sure Vince McMahon is not back? Are we sure in terms of the booking? Are we positive? I feel like this is the same thing I said when Vince was booking in 2019, where nobody got over. And we were at the exact same spot with these two at the end of 18 minutes and 45 seconds. Because Valkyria didn't prove anything afterwards, and Becky is Becky, so it's like we didn't prove anything. So it frustrated me to no end with this.
Okay, so let's talk about the four-way.
Sure.
Because we did have a debut in the four-way. LA Knight, Jacob Fatu, and Damian Priest, and Drew McIntyre. And the debut of Jeff Cobb, who I didn't realize was Samoan.
Yes. Now he is in WWE canon.
Oh my God.
I guess.
Okay, so Jacob Fatu retains, and apparently didn't know that Solo got Jeff Cobb to help out and is now part of the family. But Jacob took advantage and won and retained the U.S. title. What'd you think?
I was liking the match, and then you had the interference stuff, which I was kind of expecting. And yeah, like what you said, Jeff Cobb, I guess, is an honorary Samoan or Tongan now, even though he's from Guam. So, but I guess he's going to be part of the bloodline. Does
that insult your intelligence?
Oh yeah, but in 2025 for sure. It's like when you have Yokozuna out there and you're telling people he's Japanese when he's Samoan, But it's just like, I am happy to see Jeff Cobb. I'm a big fan of his work. I think he's a good big guy, and I'm interested to see what they do with him in WWE. I again really liked his work in New Japan, and he's had some great matches over the years. So if you put him in there with the right opponent here in WWE, I think he could certainly be a dynamic factor. And eventually, once they do the Jacob Fatu Jeff Cobb match, I think that will be very intriguing. But yeah, he's gonna be part of this new version of the bloodline, and he's the heavy, and they were talking about how Fatu didn't really want his assistance in the match. That was the story that they were trying to tell here, with Cobb and it being involved. So, I mean, I was enjoying the 4-way, then the interference stuff happened, and I was like, of course we got the interference, not knowing how many interference spots I was going to get later on throughout the card. But at the time I was like, I got it in terms of debuting a guy. Thought the 4-way was fine. I thought it was, some good action here. I thought the work was pretty good, but nothing super blowaway or like match of the year or anything like that. Just a solid 4-way to kind of get things going on the opener.
Save the best for last, Zach. Save the best for last. My man, Dum Dum. My man, Dum Dum. Against Penta for the Intercontinental Championship. I've been salivating. This should have been the main event. I've been salivating to get your take on what the should have been main event was, Zach.
Boy, really tested me here with that one.
I don't know about testing you. It should have been the main event.
Well, considering the main event we got, I don't think it's that far off.
That's what I mean.
So I'll say this. I'll be nice to Dominic Mysterio here. I thought this was one of the better performances from him that I've seen in his time in WWE. How about that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with his opponent, I'm sure.
No, not at all. I think it's obvious that he can just go out there and have himself a real lengthy match by having, let me check here, the shortest match on the show, and also having interference in his match as well. So, but nonetheless, look, I gotta give credit where credit is due. He had to look good against a guy like Penta, and he did. He obviously did that dive to the outside, that tornado DDT. If you were to ask people, they would look at that and say, hey, look at all this improvement that Dominic Mysterio is making. And I would point to the other parts in between the match with Penta, where it wasn't exactly 100% smooth that I saw from Mr. Mysterio. But this was one of his better performances. I will give him that. I thought, again, kind of going back to one of the themes I have for this show, is that I thought there were people that certainly had their working boots on, and Dominic Mysterio had his working boots on. But, it was kind of what I was expecting. I did kind of eye roll heavily once there was another interference spot in here. And I really eye rolled during the Gunther Pat McAfee stuff when Michael Cole was getting involved. That was when I really eye rolled on the interference. But here I was like, well, this is the story that they've been telling. Could it have been better? I understand Dominic Mysterio is the dirty heel, and he's going to find cheap ways to win. But the problem is, when every match is interference, it makes the dirty tactics to win not feel as special or different than everything else on the card. So I was just kind of like, I just expected what I got here. And I thought it was a decent enough match with an opponent that he should have had a good match with. So that is my nice words for Dominic Mysterio. How about that?
It wasn't awful.
Yes.
I think that's pretty nice.
Yeah. For Dominic Mysterio, I think that's pretty nice coming from me.
It was pretty good. My bar is obviously not set very high with Dom Dom. But I enjoy his character. I enjoy his work. They kind of pulled it off where Finn took his sweet ass time, deciding he would do something else and was going to cost them. And your man Penta loses another big one. Like his brother
Surely,
Ray Phoenix.
surely the light at the end of the tunnel is just so bright, leaving AEW and going to WWE for Penta, obviously.
So I think just how you see Dominic Mysterio and then compare it to Ray Phoenix and Penta. I understand the push for Dom. I wish they didn't use Penta to be able to do this, but there's been a lot of reading about Penta and Ray Phoenix being, put back together, and they have major plans for them. I'm like, okay, what are those major plans? Because of how well you treat the tag team titles? I don't know if you saw Raw on Monday, but the War Raiders, the former champs, just a joke. How they treat them. So that would worry me the most, that I keep reading all of this stuff about how they have major plans for Penta and Ray. And it's like, what would those be if they put them together? Exactly.
Yeah. Putting the belts on them, are those the major plans?
Against who?
Yeah. That's also a great question.
So, yeah, I've lost a lot of faith in where they're going with that, but for what this was, I didn't mind it.
Could have been worse.
Now, do you subscribe to the theory? Because I did pontificate before with the lack of matches and the lack of people on the card. Do you buy into the theory that less matches means less bonuses to the wrestlers, and TKO's actually saving money because people are actually going and buying the pay-per-views anyway?
I can subscribe to that theory. I can buy into that theory for sure, in terms of having less matches on the card, meaning that less people, less they have to worry about paying people or whatnot, and they can, hide behind it's Triple H booking, and we saw with Triple H when he booked those NXT TakeOver shows many years ago now, which is crazy to think about, that he only really booked those cards to have 5 or 6 matches. But you also have to remember, with those 5 and 6 matches, it was like some of the best wrestling you would see during the year on those NXT cards. So we're not getting that when it comes to these shows. But I can buy into that theory for sure, that, when you have less matches on the card, you don't have to worry about paying as many people and trying to maximize value, as corporations tend to do.
What would your overall rating be of WWE Backlash?
Oh boy. I'm hovering. The initial reaction was like a 5. I feel like that main event, I mean, was really, it was something. And there were a lot of things I didn't like about this, with the interferences and the run-ins and the finishes. It's just another Paul Levesque masterpiece that we're able to witness over the weekend. My initial reaction is a 5, and I'm having a tough time going any lower, going any higher. I thought it would have been higher if the main event was a little bit stronger. Maybe like a 5.5. But man, that main event really sunk it down. What sunk it down for me was more booking than anything else, than work. The booking and just all the interferences, and just not one clean finish just bothered me. It bothers me. So I'm sticking with my 5.
Zach, mark this down.
Okay.
I'm giving this a 1.99.
Whoa, that is low.
Yep.
Wow, that's lower than I gave SummerSlam when I was losing my mind on SummerSlam last year. Wow.
1.99.
1.99.
Because here's my reasoning. Number 1, I wouldn't pay $1.99 to watch that. Number 2, and probably more importantly, if I'm going to rate anything a 2 or higher, there's probably something on the show, at least in a 5-minute window, that I could point back and go, maybe people should watch this, or maybe you should take a different look at it. Maybe, this is at least an interesting possibility. I I thought about giving it like a 0.1 or something,
Wow.
but I'll be respectful to the people who did go out and at least try. By the way, Damian Priest, and we didn't get to this, Damian Priest and Drew McIntyre, it was really nice of them to care about the U.S. title enough to even think about getting back to the ring.
Yes, of course.
Like their thought process was so low on the U.S. title, they were just willing to just disappear.
Yep. Look, scores to settle. Scores to settle.
For sure. Especially for Drew McIntyre,
Yeah.
who just beat Damian Priest at WrestleMania. Why would he have a score to settle at all? Wouldn't he be more concerned about championships? Nope. Not even thinking about going back to the ring to try to win. Why involve yourself in the match, Zach? My whole point here is, was the work good? No. Was the booking good? No. Was the execution good? No. Were the announcers good? No. If Pat McAfee, like, it doesn't take a lot of talent to get your ass kicked, but at least there's a little bit of toughness. And I honestly think that the person that came out of that pay-per-view the best is an announcer. I believe that.
Yeah.
And if I told you that after watching this show, the person that you will kind of believe or have the most credibility for after watching the show is the announcer, how bad is that?
Pretty bad.
I can't give that a passing grade. In fact, if I give something 2 or more, there's something I think you should go back and watch. If I just told you that Pat McAfee got his ass kicked and he's by, a pretty good wrestler, and he's actually tougher than you might think, that's the only redeeming thing I can say. And I wouldn't even say go back and watch the match. It was just in the sphere of what they presented, it was the best. But as you said, I don't think it helped Gunther. I really don't. I'm trying to think of somebody other than McAfee that came out of this pay-per-view looking even as good as they did when they went in. Dom, maybe?
Maybe Dom.
Maybe Dom. But go through it. 4-way, did anybody like Jeff Cobb joining Solo, are they pretending he's Samoan?
I guess.
Because that's what I was left with. He's not. He's Guatemalan, as you said. He's from Guam.
From Guam.
In Guatemala, right?
I believe I don't think it's from Guatemala. I think it's a Honolulu, Hawaii. That's where at least he's built from.
Yeah, but he's not Samoan.
He is. The whole point is that he's not Samoan, correct?
Right. And they're trying to make you believe it.
Yes. Or Tongan, and he's not Tongan either.
There is just so much wrong with this pay-per-view. Like, there's so many things. Did Damian Priest look better? No. Drew McIntyre? Absolutely not. LA Knight? No. I don't know that Jacob did. He won, but he won because of help from a guy who's not really related to, and he can look good on his own. The only thing I got out of that match at all was, is it possible that Jeff Cobb is going to fight Jacob Fatu? If the answer is yes, I'm there for it. But their storylines didn't make sense. There's just nothing that made sense about this, and the wrestling was atrocious. And I'm telling you, I can't remember if it's a non-COVID event. I can't remember a main event that was as bad as this in a very, very, very long time. And when you have a very subpar show, that things that didn't make sense, and the announcers being bad, and Michael Cole being involved in angles, and Jeff Cobb pretending to be Samoan, and eye pokes, and like Damian and Drew just not coming back because they didn't care about the title, I guess, at all. And then the main event goes on, and it's the worst main event to me, like almost of all time. And you want me to say something good about the show? Pat McAfee looked more credible. The best thing that happened was that an announcer looked more credible. That's it. The 1.99.
Wow. I think that might be the lowest score we've ever given out on This Is Wrestling.
I'm proud of it.
Wow.
Yep. And I dare somebody to come at me with it.
Well, send all the emails. The email is in the description below. So
I want you to. I want you to send them to tell me why it wasn't that and what you actually saw that was redeeming, that it would give it more than that. Come at me. All gas, no brakes. Zach, the first time I was ever introduced to Sabu was on a VHS tape from the very, very early beginnings of Eastern Championship Wrestling into Extreme Championship Wrestling in the 90s. And I was fascinated, not because I loved the character, but because he was doing things I just had never seen before. And involving himself in matches I had never seen before. And I remember the first time that I saw him live, I had built him up a little bit to be like, okay, I've watched this guy on TV. I'm going to see him live. And he probably won't be as good as that. Or I think it was at a house show in Buffalo at the Burt Flickinger Arena. And every show they had back then was sort of like on a fan cam or videotape, but it wasn't like a major show. And guys probably won't go as hard because I'm just used to WWE shows or WCW house shows where guys don't go nearly as hard. And he was incredible. Absolutely incredible, believable, and taking chances with his body that I had never seen before. And I remember thinking, I don't even like his character. And I respect this guy so much for what he turned me onto when it came to a different side of professional wrestling. Seeing him live for the first time was one of the moments that was like, things can be different. Things can be different from, and I'm not trying to like completely throw them under the bus, but things can be different from, you know, the Hogans and in wrestling, Bundy and Akeem and the Big Boss Man and whoever it was that were just so terrible. And then into the 90s where the Doinks and the Duke the Dumpster Drosies and the Goons and all those guys that we make fun of, that was actually happening. Where you'd watch Wrestling Challenge and Duke the Dumpster Drosy would wrestle a jobber, and then Doink would wrestle a jobber, and then the Goon would wrestle a jobber, and then the Sultan would come out. And I remember thinking, this could be different because he's made me a believer now. Sabu, Terry Brunk passing away this week. Zach, your first memory of Sabu coming into your wrestling life?
Yeah, for me, Sabu was somebody, because obviously wasn't around during that time where he was really hitting his peak in the early 90s, coming in with Eastern Championship Wrestling, then obviously ECW with Extreme Championship Wrestling. So my foray into learning more about Sabu was kind of going back into wrestling history a little bit and wanting to learn more about ECW, because, you know, you look at what was even happening to WWE at that time, as you mentioned, but even, you know, after the years of the Attitude Era, they started to reshape itself and it went back to its PG product. And so you hear all about the PG product, and then you hear about this Extreme Championship Wrestling that happened in the 90s. And you hear about this TV-14 aspect that was a big thing for a lot of the wrestling fan base at the time when I was, you know, really coming in the late 2000s, early 2010s. And so you hear about, it was TV-14. It was more violent. It was more hardcore. These guys are using barbed wire. These guys are using, you know, tables were kind of the norm, and hardcore matches were kind of the norm in ECW was when I was first hearing about it. So that's when I started to foray and look at these characters and these wrestlers that were coming through ECW. And Sabu was somebody that really stuck out for me, especially in terms of the risks that he was taking on his body, as you mentioned, utilizing a chair to kind of set it up in the ring before he would make an incredible dive to the outside, utilizing the barbed wire in his matches as well. It was something where it was something really cool about him. That's the big thing with a lot of those characters of ECW back in the day, is that there was just this cool factor with them. Guys like Sabu, guys like RVD, guys like Taz. There was just this different aura and around them when you would go back and watch them just through in my eyes. And so I wanted to learn more about how this guy, why didn't this guy go to WWE longer? Why wasn't he there, sooner? And then you start to learn more about Sabu and how he really kind of revolutionized a lot of what we see now. You could trace back to what Sabu was doing during his rise and his peaks in wrestling, in terms of utilizing the hardcore match. Again, the chair in the ring, utilizing tables. You can look back to Sabu for that as well, for popularizing it. And it's been interesting to kind of look back into wrestling history, and you kind of look at some of the people that have lived through it. And I was very interested to hear how you kind of broke in with Sabu, because, a lot of people said when you first watched Sabu live, you had already heard about Sabu because he was such a talked about name, especially among tape traders during that time, because he was something different. He was something that you would hear about the stuff that he was doing, and you would not think that it would be possible for a wrestler to be able to do that. And so a lot of these people, when they're going to the ECW arena or they're watching an ECW show, they see Sabu for the first time. They already are aware of Sabu because of all the lore and the folklore around him. And I think to really put into perspective how big and how key he was in the wrestling sphere when he was at his peak, I saw that Dave Meltzer shared a tweet about the Wrestling Observer Awards in 1994. And it's really something you got to put into perspective, is that Sabu finished second for Wrestler of the Year, the Ric Flair Lou Thez Award winner. And you have to consider that he was not with a major promotion at that time. This is not the ECW that nowadays, where they're on TV, on TNN, blah, blah, blah. This is still an indie in ECW. And the fact that an independent wrestler in Sabu would reach second place, only a few votes behind, I think it was Toshiaki Kawada that won it that year, and only a few votes behind him. And you also have to take into account that Kawada was in possibly one of the greatest professional wrestling matches of all time in 6-3-94 with Mitsuharu Misawa. That's just how impactful Sabu was when he came onto the scene, and his style was really revolutionizing the wrestling industry. And so it was really interesting to see him kind of like his style take hold, and you see some of the similarities and some of the stories you would hear. I think it's a damn shame that for all that Sabu has put into the wrestling industry in terms of his innovativeness and his creativity and the stuff that he was able to revolutionize during his time in ECW and in wrestling, that he, quite frankly, never got that support back from professional wrestling, never really had that big money contract. I know he was in WWE briefly in the mid-2000s when they revived the ECW brand, but he should have been somebody that should have been on a major show in WWE or WCW for a longer period of time, being a much more key figure. And unfortunately, wrestling didn't really give it back to him. So I look at all that. I see how innovative he was during that time. And it really kind of puts into perspective how influential he was to the wrestling business.
I think that's well said. And, how popular he became on the indies when you had no traction other than word of mouth and tape trading and all that stuff is crazy. And one of the other things that I just fascinated by is when you say Sabu to me, this is probably different from a lot of people, or maybe not. But they think of all the crazy stuff, and certainly, you think jumping into barbed wire and chairs and doing some stuff that you just like, oh my god, he ripped his bicep completely open. But when I think of Sabu, I do tie him to Paul Heyman, and I do one of the like WWE in the last few years with Roman Reigns has been this, and I know that this has hurt you a little bit, this very, very long-term storytelling. Well, this happened in ECW with two feuds with Raven and Tommy Dreamer that just kept continuing on and on. But Sabu and Taz, when it was built, and they missed the mark because they couldn't get on pay-per-view as quickly as they wanted to, and then they finally did. The match never lived up to what the build was. But for me, the build of Sabu and Taz for a long, long time, ECW put so much time and money into them building towards, payoff that they're finally going to get after each other. And it was, look, there's some hiccups along the way with Sabu doing some other things in Japan and getting paid more and then not telling people and coming back. But the long-term build of Sabu and Taz was one of my kind of first forays into what real long-term storytelling was. And again, I'm kind of a late teen. I'm trying to understand the wrestling business. I really like some of the different, not WWE, or even at that point, like I was past, the Ric Flair and Steamboat stuff, and Flair had left and gone to WWE. And so this is a bit about Paul Heyman and ECW, but it's about Sabu too, about committing to that long-term storytelling. And as a fan, I wanted to see Taz and Sabu go after each other for a very, very long time. And for a guy who didn't talk, and of course he had managers that did all that stuff for him, but he never talked and was never a guy that really could communicate. And they still were able to put him at that level. It was incredible. And his talent was unmatched. And I think of that Sabu Taz feud as one of the real introductions to me about long-term storytelling and where you could go with a wrestler that didn't talk, but was so different from anybody else that you had ever seen before. You didn't care. And then you pair him up, right, with Bill Alfonso and with all kinds of different people that are helping him along the way. And they did a brilliant job with that. But again, I learned from him and others as well about what real long-term storytelling could be without ever having to speak. And I thought that was just something so abstract for me that I'll always remember him for it. I really will. And you said that you never really got the big payday, and you went to WWE for a bit, and you went to WCW for a bit. Oh my God, he flamed out.
Yeah.
And they just didn't use him right. And it was to the point where I was such a fan of these guys, and then them not used as well as you were used to seeing them. It's like I'm used to seeing Raven and Sabu and Taz and Rob Van Dam and all these guys used really to their maximum potential to get everything out of them. And then when they went, you understood that they went and got bigger paydays, and you were never satisfied with what guys did afterwards. Never. And he was a big part of that. And I'll just never forget seeing him live, Zach, and thinking how different he was from everybody else.
Yeah.
It's what will always stand out.
For sure. And it's interesting you mentioned too with the long-term storytelling of Taz and Sabu. number one, being able to put that amount on Sabu to rely on him to draw for your company, I think is a big show of support for him in terms of helping to grow ECW, and having to go through that long-term route, because initially, Barely Legal was supposed to be aired a year earlier, but then you had the stuff with Mass Transit, and I believe there was also some stuff about the UFC at that time when it was coming in. So you had that combination of stuff and the violence that it postponed ECW's debut on pay-per-view. So to have that trust in Sabu to say, okay, we're going to continue to put this feud over with Sabu and Taz, obviously. We're going to continue to trust that this will still be hot when we do this pay-per-view, because that's what Paul Heyman wanted in terms of one of his big selling matches to be, was Taz and Sabu, and he was willing to save it for as long as it needed to until the pay-per-view debut. I think that's a feather in the cap of Sabu. And yeah, just some of the stuff that he's able to do. And look, he was not the smoothest when it came to delivering the moves.
Nope.
That's kind of the thing about Sabu, is that when he would hit it, it would be unbelievable, right? And even with some of the stuff when he couldn't hit it 100%, it was still very much in the vein of Sabu, that it was still in a weird way kind of cool that he was trying to do that.
And that's, to that point, I would say more than just a few times he would miss.
Yep.
Or would not execute properly. And it's like the people just didn't care. They appreciated the effort that he would go to more than the result, which I thought, that's a lot of faith that people have in you, that when they don't care, they really don't care, that you would do that. It's a really good point you bring up.
Yeah. It's one of the cool things about Sabu. And I just still I just look at him and I just see just cool. And also, you can also credit him as well if you want with, kind of being the guy that really popularized the lights out, lights on stuff with the entrance. And he would obviously do the pose when he would, make his appearance in ECW. And really for me, when I look back at his run, I obviously you have to go back and watch his stuff from, I want to say 92 to 95, to me is kind of the peak of Sabu and some of the things that he was able to do. But there's still some really cool stuff that he was able to do in the late 90s. I still find the tag team he had with RVD in 97 to 98 still a really fun tag team to go back and watch. And specifically going back and watching Heatwave 98 and seeing RVD and Sabu take on Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki is such a tremendous match. And Sabu at his best in my mind from the matches I've seen. That's one of my personal favorite ECW matches. That whole pay-per-view, people need to go out of their way to check out. That's a great pay-per-view that ECW put together with Heatwave 98.
And never got the recognition it probably deserved.
Yep, absolutely. It's something that I was surprised when I heard the news, when I saw that Sabu would pass, only because really, he had just wrestled his retirement match, quote unquote, but you know how it is in pro wrestling. He had, retired a few weeks earlier in that match. But I was thinking, man, he's going to try and find a way to wrestle again. Cause the final years was for Sabu was kind of, he would no show stuff and he would want to try and make money on certain things. I was surprised when I heard he had passed, and I had just kind of gone back and watched some of the other stuff that he did in ECW, and it was just kind of reinforced to me how really influential he was in a lot of the stuff that we see today, and some of the risks that he was willing to take with his body. And funny enough, in that Heatwave 98 match, it was kind of interesting to see the parallel with him and Hayabusa, because those are both guys that took risks and were famous for their hardcore wrestling companies. And both had these scars all across their body from the abuse that they had taken, specifically with barbed wire. It was kind of interesting to see that contrast as well. But Sabu passing away, it surprised me. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. ECW legend, and when you say that, I think that word is thrown around, but really, when you talk about what ECW was and kind of the core culture that it was, he's like, just he's right in the center of it. Right? When you think about ECW back in the day of when it was at its best, it was, it was Taz, it was ECW, or it was Sabu,
Mhm.
it was Raven and Dreamer and Sandman and, probably Shane Douglas. And you can throw, there's obviously way more, but when you think of the heart, the Dudleys, you think of the heart of what ECW was. He was a huge, huge piece of that.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt died this week, was like a little piece of my nostalgia, because ECW was my favorite company. It just did things for me as a wrestling fan that no other company did. And when you think about the 5 or 6 or 7 people that were the heart of that company, Sabu's right in the middle of that. So really a sad day, Sabu passing away earlier this week. That's going to do it for us, Zach. It's nice to actually talk in a positive way about some different things of the wrestling world, including the career of Sabu. And I've forgotten all about whatever it was that we talked about.
Yeah, what did we talk about? It shows an hour of recording or something like that. I don't know what we were talking about beforehand.
Yeah,
so.
I can't remember. I'm hoping not to remember the future WWE pay-per-views probably as well. So a little Backlash, a little Sabu, and we'll get back into some AEW with their Beach Break show and some of the other things that are coming up here very soon. We'll get back to Dark Side of the Ring as well. So for Zach McGibbon, I'm Lee Versage. Thanks again for listening to another edition of This is Wrestling.